Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Hey, this is Johnny Lee with Peace at Work, Panic Button. I want to thank you so much for joining us early. There's a number of other folks who are going to be joining us as well, so we're just holding off till the others join, and we still have about 5 minutes till the top of the hour. So we'll be getting started right on time. Thank you. Hey, folks, a bunch of people just joined us. I just want to say thank you so much for starting early, and I look forward to the presentation and the discussion that we'll hopefully have. All right, we'll get started soon. Please hold. Hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we've got folks calling in right now and we'll be starting in just a second. So please hold off for a second, a little technical difficulties, but we're getting that worked out now. So the person will be able, our other panelists will be able to join us shortly. Again, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you showing an interest in this subject. And, if it goes well, maybe we can continue the conversation. As I was going through this, I realized that there's a lot to go over. Great. Um, let me just. There we go. Hey, hi everyone. This is Johnny Lee. Is this B?
Yes.
Hey, great. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're ready to go because I think we're right at the top. I'm so glad that we got that all figured out. So thank you again. This is a brief discussion about what we can call the incel revolution and rampage violence. We'll discuss that a bit more in just a second. But regarding discussion, if you could see, I really encourage you all to join this. And while certainly I have a few slides to go over and things to point out, and I know B will have things she wants to say. I think we would find this much more engaging if it was a dialogue. Now, to do that, the way I find that works best is if you expand out the questions tab, and you could try doing that there. I'll certainly repeat anyone's questions and not identify any participants just for your own confidentiality. And of course, we're going to be focusing on civility. So just, if it has value, if it's got something to add to the conversation, then certainly that is welcome. Briefly, a little bit about myself. I'm with a program called the Panic Button, and I've been doing violence prevention work through Peace at Work for a number of years now. There's my contact information. Anything I can do to help, please let me know. But on the other side, we have an old friend. When I was in North Carolina, I worked with Bea Cote, who's done so much around also with batterers intervention programs and domestic violence prevention efforts. Bea, did you want to say anything a little bit more about your work or about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody here today. My background is actually in working with child abuse offenders, and also in the past 20 years, I've worked exclusively with domestic violence offenders here in North Carolina. And I have a batterer intervention program we're now calling Battering Intervention Program in 8 different counties here in North Carolina. And I speak around the country about the topic of my work with abusers.
Wonderful. Thank you. As for those of you who are following along online, like looking at the screen, you could see it's impactdv.org if you wanted to get involved. And I encourage you to check out the site. Great.
Thank you.
Oh, you bet. So why are we here? I want to jump into this and really start engaging in the conversation. This all started off as you well know, last month there was the horrific attack in Toronto where a man got in a van and purposely drove on the sidewalks, hitting a number of people. Now, it came about that allegedly there was a post up here in the upper right. The Incel rebellion has begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. I'll explain that in a bit. All hail the Supreme Gentleman, Elliot Rogers. I'll talk about that a bit more. One thing I want to say is I don't think it's so important whether he actually posted this or not. There's some controversy about that. The issue is that there certainly is a online community that is pretty misogynistic, pretty hateful towards women. And the question is whether this fosters or leads to violence in individual relationships or against the public at large, such as this horrific Toronto attack. Very little has been said about this investigation, by the way, from the authorities. A lot of it's all been speculation or through the media. I look forward to seeing an official report. Now, for this conversation, I just want to say I really want to have people talking, but it's really, I insist on civility. Everyone's got a viewpoint. If there's any bashing or accusations or just threats being made, that certainly is not appropriate and you'll just be booted out. The insistence is that everyone has to be looking to stop violence, injustice, stopping violence against anyone for any reasons aside from direct self-defense. One little note, while be in some of the work that I do focuses on domestic violence, where there's a relationship or even a perceived relationship. Initially, I was concerned about its impact on rampages, such as the couple incidents that I'll mention in a little bit. One note I want to say that certainly these organizations, these viewpoints rather, could certainly promote violence within a relationship as well. Now, I feel like I'm talking a lot. I encourage anyone, especially B, please speak up or interrupt along the way. It's great to have a conversation. Naturally, at the end, we'll pause and allow for people to make comments or ask questions at that point. Now, first of all, just as a quick overview, for you not aware, to be honest with y'all, it was new to me about this term incel. I didn't hear about it till a few weeks ago, and it basically refers to being involuntarily celibate. And I've only heard this in the male context. I've never heard of any female incel groups. In that post, he also, or whoever posted it, made a reference to Chads and Stacy's. That's sort of slang for Chad is your typically attractive guy, successful, jock, athletic, handsome man, and a Stacy is referred to like an attractive, high, very beautiful, your typical Barbie doll kind of image. So that's just the slang for that. MGTOW is what's that called? It's just an acronym when it's using the letters for the first letter in a word. It stands for men going their own way. Oh, the way got cut off by the picture. It's an organization that expressed some frustrations, typically in what they can argue in today's culture. It's more difficult for men to be in relationships. Therefore, they're saying, forget the whole thing. We're going to do our own issues, our own life. Related to this, some other terms like red pill, black pill, blue pill. This all makes reference back to the famous uh, Matrix with Keanu Reeves, with the you can take the blue pill and stay ignorant, or take the red pill and wake up. And there's a thought there that these gentlemen have taken the red pill and they're moving on and realizing that there's other ways of living life. Black pill is a variant of that, saying they're aware of the problems in our world, but they just say it's hopeless and there's nothing you can do. Any comments or questions, things we want to add on? It can be very difficult to come up with all the little phrases and slang used on the internet. There's always something new and invented, and there's no authority. No one says definitively what certain terms mean, such as the alt-right. Now, why are we here? Broadly, the purpose of this presentation is looking at two large issues. One is a direct threat. So the question is, in these communities, would it be known that someone's it's stating that they're going to commit violence against a person or against a group, and then what we can do about that? And then broadly, the bigger conversation is, do these organizations foster or breed violence and hatred that that can eventually lead to real actual violence against someone? And we're going to go over those points, each of these points in detail. Cool. I think it's. Oh, hey, I don't know if that was a question or a point. Again, feel free to ask questions along the way. I've written extensively about these two people. George Sidini is the man on the right, and then you may have heard of Elliot Rogers, the young man on the left, who's sitting in his car. George Sidini killed a number of women. I think it was back in 2009 at a fitness gym, LA Fitness in Pennsylvania. And then Elliot Rogers was a more famous case in Santa Barbara area. I might say this wrong, Isla Vista, California. What combines them is they both wrote extensively about their frustrations about not having a female companionship, and they felt that women owed them the for their level of attractiveness, for their monetary wealth, that they should be getting this attention. The key thing I want to mention, this is really important, they were not involved with any online communities. They were not known to post in any of these groups. It was all very, very private. Just real briefly, we could talk about George Sidini. He had a blog. This is way back when blogs were first coming out there, and he sort of journals about his thoughts and his feelings as he plans for this mass shooting. Again, my point is, in no way was it a communication. It was more of like a private journal that just happened to be online. You can sure look it up yourself. The same can be said about Elliot Rogers, that he wrote. I'm not, to be honest with you, now I'm thinking, I don't think it was ever anywhere online. It might have been just on his own like Word document, just on his own computer. So it was never on the internet, but then it was posted and he distributed it just before his horrendous assault. And you can certainly read some of the words there. Golly, I'm feeling like I'm just talking too much. Can you speak a little bit about the sense of entitlement, the sense of they deserve the attention for women, in your experience with some of the cases you've worked with?
Sure. I think that entitlement is at the root of most
Yeah.
of the abuse committed by the men in my program, or who've been in my program.
Mm.
And I think a lot of it we used to say was about power and control, about wanting to assert their dominance in the relationship.
Mm.
But I believe that entitlement is a bigger picture. I think that power and control, when that happens, when it's for that reason, is one of the many types of entitlement.
Right.
And it may be one of the bigger ones. But so in this case, it would be entitlement to make someone suffer as they feel they've suffered.
Right. That's a huge issue. Thank you. I feel like I'm pushing something, but like I just wrote a book and I'm very since proud of it. And I look at mass shootings, and I think that is the point about wanting them to wanting others to know about the pain that they've suffered. There has been this movement within the mass prevention, threat assessment, mass shooting prevention issues about not naming the assailant. Right? Have you heard that about sheriffs and certain media?
I have.
Sure.
In order to not give him the glory or
That's right.
the attention, I think. Yeah.
However, my argument is not so much about the personal fame. It's not like about celebrity, like, you knowing my name or my face. Their issues, they want everyone to know about their pain. So Elliot Rogers committed a horrendous act, full knowledge it would get, 24-hour news coverage for, the next week. And that would lead people to read his manifesto. And that was his goal. And in the manifesto, it's pure, I don't know if you ever read it, B, but it's pretty, all the things, the entitlement, the resentment, and then you hurt me so much, you need to all feel my pain and be aware of my pain.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that's one thing I see a lot in many of my clients. I see this, they come in identifying as victims. So, and they strongly believe themselves to be the victims of these women, most of which they've had a relationship with, but sometimes it's just been a couple of dates.
Yeah.
And it's identified in the community as an intimate partner relationship because they dated. But, clearly that relationship didn't work out for her, but he has pinned all his hopes and dreams on this relationship. And so he can't deal with the rejection. So he sees himself as her victim.
Yes.
Because of the rejection.
Yep.
So then when he comes into my program, I've got a group full of victims. And that's why they're so convincing to other people in their lives, because they honestly believe themselves to be her victim. And what they were doing, what we see as abuse, and has been, for the most part, criminally convicted as abuse, they see as retaliation.
Absolutely. Yes. Like they've been wronged. And my little speech, like my elevator speech is, like serial killers, they know what they're doing is wrong and they get off on it. Like there's their true pathology, that they enjoy the evilness of it. Mass shooters believe that they are victims and they're carrying out justice. And they feel that what they're doing is right. It just struck me that one thing when we talk about justice, I do a lot of work around domestic violence in the workplace, and I have a large percentage of these individuals who will go and shoot their partners, kill the woman in the relationship, and then they drive straight to the police department or they call the police themselves. And so that's an entirely different mindset than like a robbery or a serial killer. Yeah.
because these guys would never commit a real crime.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
for the most part, a lot of times they may be judges, or,
Yeah.
you know, they may be upstanding citizens in the
Hmm.
community, and then they are so in such terrible pain, such terrible psychic, emotional pain
Hmm.
at the rejection, because almost all domestic violence murders happen after the
Yes.
victim has told him she's leaving, he thinks she's leaving, she's left, or she won't return.
Right.
And we used
Oh,
to say 75%, but
yeah.
I think we're coming up closer to 100% now.
Right, and it's how that's like, defining leaving. Is it the point when she says I'm leaving, or when she's packing up her bags? Like it's that
Or he
definitely.
hears her on the phone.
Yes, lack of control.
Yeah.
The other factor, like, because I do threat assessment work. The other one I watch, and I know you're aware of this, is if the individual, the partner who left, starts seeing someone else. Because some people, there's a thought, well, we're
Yeah.
taking a little break right now. I'm giving her space, but as soon as
Mhm.
you're seeing someone
Mhm.
else, that's the line. So
Yes,
to me, that's a
exactly.
red flag.
That's right. That I count that under the
Yeah.
she's not coming back.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, that's a sign that she's not coming back. Where in reality, she left him a long time
Hmm.
ago,
Yes.
and she has moved
Yes.
on.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. That entitlement, this really is, in, breaks up, that opens up a lot more doors regarding the question. One thing that I've seen in both these gentlemen, and I take that back, they're not gentlemen. These two people, is that they did all the right things, they felt in their minds about to look a certain
Right.
way or drive a certain car. One thing, if you ever want to just watch some horrible video, um, uh, George Sedini joined a men's group, and he was it was about this right attitudes workshop, and it's about how to pick up women, and the speaker was talking about all the right things, and there's one of the assignments from being in this group is to shoot a video of your home, in which there's other online videos. You could see Sedini going around his house, and he's showing, hey, I work out, I have a nice home, I keep my place clean, I've got the right car, why aren't you sleeping with me? And it's, yeah, again, that sort of short-sighted entitlement.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think a lot falls under that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
cool.
And what's sad is for a lot of these young guys, because he was a young guy, Sedini was. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, for a lot of these young guys, almost all men have these same experiences with being rejected, with not finding somebody to date. So,
yeah.
what is then the difference between those guys who have
Yes,
common everyday experiences with learning how to be in a
yes.
relationship, and these guys who see it as the ultimate rejection and then blame 51% of the population?
That's the real heart of the question. That's a really important question. Um, by the way, I want to back up when we talk about mass shootings and stuff. There's a lot of attention's put on gun control, and I don't want to enter that fray. But another sector is mental health. Now, a lot of people are concerned about stigmatization of people who have mental health issues,
Mhm.
that they're dangerous, and I respect that there's concerns there. Certainly, many people who suffer from mental health are also more likely to be victims. I agree with that. However, I mean, just, to be crass, like, you got to be crazy to just take out a gun and start shooting people randomly. I mean, that's just,
Mhm.
by my book definition, nuts. And I realize it's unfair to make that crass description, but please, there's something. One of the things, if you ever read this long tirade, My Twisted World, his narcissism is
Yeah.
epic. It's chronic. It's archetypal.
Yeah.
um, it's, yeah,
It's the new catch. It's the new catch
yeah,
disorder, if you will.
yeah.
You know, that's the hot button. Everybody and all the victims of domestic violence victims out there are labeling their abusers as narcissistic,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a problem.
It
Not
is.
everybody who's a jerk is a narcissist.
That's a great point. That's right. It's, and one thing with, I told you about my threat assessment tool I'm working on. It's a complex issue. There's many factors involved. Yes, guns play a role. Yes, mental health plays a role. Yes, online communities play a role. It's
Right.
it's that juxtaposition of all of them. If I
Right.
may, now I might even get more controversial. The question is whether these communities, by the way, like you, no offense, people, you and I, we both grew up in a different era. Our kids, right, grow up in a different world, and that's a reality. In the different world I'm talking about is the online community. The question is how much of these
Hmm.
online communities might foster and exasperate hostility. I don't want to jump
Hmm.
into right, wrong, whose fault, what's not, but the argument can be made within the Black Lives Matter movement that there's certain elements that promote violence. Here's one case. I've had the fortune of working with some really smart people who focus in on homeland security, and this is a real threat about overseas Islamic jihadist groups trying to create cells in
Hmm.
in America. The thing that's really different here is, and I gotta say, this is truly unique, is that these organizations have money, direction, leadership. I mean, quote unquote, they have a newsletter, right? Like it's an organization,
They're
and they
very
are
powerful.
yes, and it is a real threat. I know it's not being concerned. By the way, if there's concerns that I'm pointing out, like African Americans or Muslims, boom, it goes to the other side too. What you could describe as the alt right certainly has its same violent concerns. And we all remember the horrible incident in Charlottesville. The thing,
Johnny, if I
oh
could,
please, yeah,
if I could about these groups, is I think that what we have here is that um, that because of the internet and because of social media, people can find like-minded groups.
that's right, that's right.
People can find places where they feel that they fit in and they're understood. And then when they're placed in these groups or when they join these groups, all the information they start getting supports what they believed anyway.
Thank you. You've really nailed that. I think a lot of not only yourself but so many people have pointed out this very worrisome issue. Um, I guess there's pros and cons of everything. I want to say you and I grew up where there was just four news stations, right? ABC, NBC, CBS, right,
Yeah,
right, and that was
yeah,
where
yeah,
Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings and Edward. Well, I'm too young
yeah.
for Edward Murrow, but you are too. The the but now you could find a news source that focuses entirely just on feminine extreme feminism or extreme toxic masculinity. And
Sure.
you and I talked earlier about what I call the bell curve effect. That most people are in the middle, but if you join a group that focuses on one subject, suddenly that shift, what's the bell curve, is suddenly the extreme. Um, and it could what I'm concerned about is the one upping each other. One of the
Mhm.
sad things is we could see within memes or postings, people could say something, and in a general group that would be considered extreme, but in this one group it might be considered the norm. So then, what's extreme within that group? And now it gets very scary very quickly.
Right.
Um, I want to just one thing I just want to say about these organizations. When I would say whether it's MGTOW or Incel or whatever, that there's really no organization. There's no 501c3. There's no board of directors. It's just a bunch of people posting online. And if I could say, Reddit, you might have different feelings about Reddit or 4chan and stuff like that, but Reddit has banned the Incel groups, and so they've gone to other sources. And then there's some Facebook groups as well. Uh, well, we'll talk about that later about the social media, mainstream social media approach. If I can, I want to say, what's the value of this? Where do we go? Why are we talking? And the issue is that I believe that the vast majority of people would want to stop a rampage or someone from being murdered. And then what we really need is individuals in those groups being willing to come forward. There's a term within security, within threat assessment, called leakage. It's this point right here. Leakage is not a threat like I'm going to beat you up, but it's like I'm talking to someone else and I go, boy, that person really made me angry. I'm going to beat them up. And so it's like you're talking about what you're going to do. And probably the most worrisome famous case recently is Nicholas Cruz, the alleged shooter in the Parkland High School in Broward County, Florida. He allegedly posted, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." So The question is,
Mm.
like, as you see one of these groups, I'm gonna shoot my girlfriend tonight. Wow. Or my ex. Who comes forward? Who's gonna, speak up about that? Um, Another note, just from my perspective, in general, you have to worry about specifics. So if someone says, "Man, I hate my ex girlfriend," she's going to regret dumping me. So that's sort of a
So,
threat. That is a threat, but I just want to point out that
right.
something that's much more concerning is if you say on Friday, May 4th, at the parking lot at Publix at 4 o'clock, I'm using my Glock 23. Do you see what I mean? When you name the specifics, that makes the threat much more credible. I'm sorry, you were going to say
Johnny,
something?
it's something
Yeah.
real interesting about that, though, is that almost all domestic violence murder victims
Mm.
were murdered in the exact way that they had warned people that he had threatened.
Ah, right. Sure. Yes. Absolutely. It stares you in the face, doesn't it? I mean, they're saying exactly how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, where they're going to do it, and then they do it.
Right?
and uh,
But
and you say,
no,
can
but
this
if
be
it's
prevented?
only her,
Yeah.
yeah, if she's the only one who knows, if she's
Mm,
the only one he's told threat to,
true.
and she tells the courts, our courts don't take that very seriously.
Yeah.
In a
Sure.
lot of jurisdictions, threats are not taken really seriously in domestic violence cases, but
That,
yet there we are.
right. Right. And this is a larger issue. One point I feel a little bad. You and I guess maybe I guess we're on the same side. I know there's some other topics maybe we should have another time where we may disagree. But the but the point is, I wish we had someone from and quote their side. From me, I did reach out. Oh, full disclosure, I did reach out to certain groups saying, "Hey, does anyone want to come and speak? As long as you can put a coherent sentence together and not being attacking
Hmm.
others. What's your view?" So we don't have that. But you're absolutely right about the threats are not. If it just in all fairness, what the reason I went down this path, B, was because um, this, it's a misdemeanor, and it's
Yeah.
what's defined, and you're in North Carolina, right? So there's the specific definitions of, I think the crime is called communicating threats.
Yes,
um,
communicating. Uh-huh.
right, and there's specific guidelines of what makes that. So there's
Right.
there's there's sort of 2 points here. There's the legal standing, and then there's like the real standing, because someone could say you're going to regret this, and that may not count as communicating threats, but it certainly is a threat.
But it is to the victim,
Yes.
and then the victim has a responsibility to convince the courts
Right.
that that was indeed a threat.
That's right.
If he says, for instance, I'm going to send you flowers Friday,
Hmm. Hmm.
and she knows that that means that he's going to kill her,
Right.
how do you convince the court
Ah,
that
that's
sending
tough.
flowers
Yeah,
threat? Yeah.
that's right. That's right. And then there's little. I imagine there could be like these little hints. Like I think of lilies. A lily is typically at funerals, like white lilies.
Yeah.
So, but
Funeral
that's
flower.
there's a message in there. Yeah. So
Exactly.
absolutely, and I hope everyone on this call agrees. If you anything that could be potentially a threat, it's a matter of reporting. Some of the challenges I just want to put down here is report to who? Law enforcement. So there's reporting to Facebook saying, "Hey, this is violation." That's just getting it off of taking down the post. But then do you go to law enforcement? I do a lot of workplace violence with the employer, within schools or campuses. It may be the administration that's involved. And I think well, I'll put on this a little bit. The one point I want to make is it's always better to be safe than sorry. And then the other important factor is it's really important to screen capture anything, because people generally wake up and go, "Oh my goodness." Well, who knows? But I'm positive that people have posted things online. I've done that, right? I bet you have too. Like you post something like, "Oh heck, I better take that down," right? Yeah. So it's important to capturing it at the moment. Screen captures.
I just had a thought about
Yeah.
the workplace violence that you mentioned.
Hmm.
I work as a consultant for a large corporation. They actually have a domestic violence unit within their HR department.
Wow.
And I consult them about, yeah, did you know that? And I consult about abusers. Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah.
That's great. But
And go ahead.
I'm sorry, is this a large employer? You don't have to name names, but is it a large one?
Yes, huge.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think okay.
international. So
Yep.
what was real surprising to me when I started doing my consulting with them is that they really have no way to enforce or to protect the victim if the abuser works in that oh, sorry, now I've got people mowing the lawn outside my window. I
No
apologize.
problem. It's all good.
And there's
I don't
nothing I
hear it.
can do about it.
I don't hear
So
it.
anyway, okay, good. So there's nothing that HR can do. For instance, if they have an abuser working for them and there is a restraining order on him by another coworker, there's really nothing they can do. They can't threaten his job.
That's right.
They can't make him go to a battering intervention program like mine.
Right.
They're really limited unless he commits a crime at the workplace.
That's right.
And so who do you tell? So, and how can the workplace protect you, if you get these threats, if they're veiled threats?
That is a real challenge. I brought in a few times with this too, and as you know, the defendant or the order is against the defendant. It's the employer's nowhere in that. There's no legal requirement on the employers.
Right.
And then now, that being said, if something should happen, that a notice of the restraining order can be proven as foreknowledge and then negligence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the threat comes in, or the threat meaning the potential liability. Yeah.
Yep. And it just provides a paper trail for
Yes.
when he does do something major. So once again, preventing based on these threats is really hard.
Absolutely. It really is. I just want to play a little defense here, a little, devil's advocate, I guess. And we have to realize that when people post things, there's a direct threat. But the question is, let's say someone's posting a lot of virulent, is that the right word, virulent? Like really hateful stuff, like really hateful. And you could say, well, this person's dangerous because they're posting such hateful stuff. We have to recognize, the hatefulness is somewhat relative. It's like what you think is evil, hateful, and deadly, someone else might just think is funny. And so, as I said earlier, there's a lot of poop posting. It's actually called something else, but trying to keep it civil. And we have to recognize, no, it really is just a joke. The other concern is if there is this monitoring, this chilling effect on postings, it's just going to drive it underground too. So that there's a concern there. So if people are saying, hey, well, we need to monitor this, and everyone posts something hateful, we're going to shut it down, and we're going to have cops knock on their door. Boom. In some ways, that could be a danger as well. There's unintended consequences.
True.
Cool. All right, so this is the fun part, folks. And by the way, I'm really enjoying. Thank you so much for this conversation. But I'm really curious who might be on the call and who wants to say something else. Maybe we say something. I'm tempted to say something outrageous just to troll you and get you to respond or post something. Feel free, folks. The main issue when we talk about these organizations, Reddit shut down some of them for being so hateful. There's questions about Facebook and its censorship. But there's questions. By the way, are you aware of the concept of sort of the public health approach to violence prevention, like tertiary prevention, secondary prevention, and primary prevention? Have you
Not
heard
in
the
this.
terms? Well, real broadly, we're looking at dealing with the so tertiary is when you have the direct threat, like someone's out to kill you, and then you put in prevention or protection measures. So the threat is real and it's happening. Secondary is when there's high risk individuals, such as someone who maybe, I don't know, like you grew up in a violent household and there's concerns, or maybe there's substance abuse and all these other factors where it's a high risk area. Primary prevention is looking at the community in general, and let's remove the things that create the risk factors. And so there is certainly a very strong movement out there that we need to limit postings and communications and people's statements because it creates this hatred. So this is Ben Shapiro was speaking in Berkeley, and certainly people physically tried to stop him from speaking. So the question is, anyone have any thoughts here? I got my own thoughts, but one thing I didn't want to do, folks, is it would be too easy for me to go into these Facebook groups, right? And then just like find the horrible, ugly posts and things that they have, and just say, "Oh, this is awful. Look at this terrible thing." Yes, it is terrible, but do we say you can't? They can't have that space, that they can't, to have these feelings or make these jokes. So I'll keep moving on until someone's got something to say. I showed the slide earlier. The problem is within these organizations is we discussed this earlier, that I call it just the one-upping each other. Like someone says something kind of misogynistic, and then someone takes it to the next level, and they take it to the next level, and they take it to the next level, and suddenly it's ugly as sin. Yeah. So, and by the way, I think this falls within any organization. I could pick any topic. Like, I love animals. I always rescue animals from shelters. But there's some extreme stuff within like Animal Liberation Front, which I don't agree with. So in any movement thought that there's a spectrum, there's a continuum, and we have to recognize that there's extremes in any belief system. Like
What you might be saying is there's crazies out there.
yeah, there sure are, and it just that they're, but those crazies, while in a normal group, like you just randomly sample like 100 people, if someone says something crazy, then it would stand out and be like, oh, that's crazy. But if you're in a group that all have same beliefs, that may not sound so crazy when it's in that group. I came up with a stupid example of like owning like 49 fishing poles. Like, why would anyone own 49 fishing poles, right? You got to be nuts. Like, why? But then if you're in a group of your avid fishermen, maybe that wouldn't be so strange. And maybe within that group, there's a subset of super crazy, enthusiastic fishermen. And, then it's not so odd anymore.
Fishing pole collectors.
Yeah, fishingpolecollectors.com. Check it out. They're very powerful political group. So one note, and maybe I'm playing defense here or devil's advocate, but these organizations also believe that they may actually help. There was one video that I watched called Elliot Rogers, George Hasdeen Were Not MGTOW. And while he might say I thought he said some pretty hateful, ugly things, but the one thing I approved of is says, we can't commit violence. We need to stop these people. So here's his point. MGTOW is an organization that says men don't need to have women. If you feel rejected, fine, we don't need them. And I personally have some issues with that stance, but they're clearly saying don't hurt women, don't hit people, don't shoot women, and I gotta agree with that, of course.
So they're just saying, just ignore them, stay away from them, and protect yourself by staying away from them.
Right. Sadly, and I guess here I am criticizing it, and I said I wasn't going to do that, but I think the idea is that there's other ways of finding. God, okay, we're all grown-ups here, right? They believe like instead of having sexual relations with a woman, you could appease yourself with porn. Instead of having the emotional benefits of a relationship with a woman, you can have like the brotherhood, the bromances, or just fulfill yourself with more materialistic things. Certainly, me being a father and a husband getting married again, and it's pretty expensive being a dad and a husband. So I'm sure I can have a nicer car. And they're saying, why don't you go for these things instead of these materialistic things?
Okay, which is a whole lot better than kill women.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is that within these communities, you're finding a lot of jokes, and I think there has to be some leeway for this. There's a lot of joking, and again, I don't want to show you these memes and these pictures that are pretty hateful towards women. But like they find this solace, they find this relief going, let's bash women and we can all feel better again about being rejected. Yeah.
Well, speaking of rejection,
yeah.
and there are emotions behind anger, all right?
Yes.
Anger is caused by something, and usually it's caused by pain.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that could be emotional pain too. So I don't want to disregard that these folks are often in a lot of pain.
Yes.
But when does it get to the point where it's pathological?
Great question.
With their coping skills are so poor
Hmm.
in dealing with things that we all deal with every day.
That's right.
Depending on the stages in our lives, a lot of it,
That's right.
but these are people who cannot cope with pain.
That's a great point. One of the things a separate issue I think is really getting ignored, and I think it's the most important violent, no offense, but I think the most important violent issue facing our country is suicide. And the question about pain, dealing with pain, the one factor that the best protective factor to prevent against suicide is resilience, and that's a quality that's I believe, and a lot of people believe, is being just diminished. Like people are becoming much less resilient.
Unless, yeah, and in suicide, unless it's true mental illness,
Right.
or complete total despair. Um, but yeah, I have seen, even in my work, I have had several clients commit suicide
I'm
in an
sorry.
effort to retaliate against their victim.
Oh my goodness, that drives me crazy. It just I've seen. I'm sorry, I got a little personal there because I know some stories of people making the threat. I know you've heard it. They go to their partner saying, "If you don't do this, I'll kill myself." And it's this.
Yeah, that's one of the things we
It's
assess for. Yeah.
and yeah, I just lose it when I hear that stuff. Yeah, it
Again,
certainly is
it's
a big
lack
concern.
of coping skills. Yeah, it's lack
Yes,
of coping skills and wanting to express themselves and the
yes.
depths of their pain or their feel of loss of control.
That's right, and it's there's many the coping factors. There's a lot of issues around their personal health. If they get a bad diagnosis, if they lose their job, they're getting bankruptcy, they lose their home,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah,
compounding losing the relationships. It's where they're in an area of despair. The question going back to this topic is: do these communities provide a solace where you can complain, like when you just want to complain with other people who can relate with you, there's value in that, but
sure.
then when is that complaining becoming uh exasperating, like it's you're just like it's not relieving the resentment, it's actually feeding the resentment.
And when does it turn to planning?
Oh, right. Exactly, and that's what my I'm sorry, going back to my book, but there's too much attention, I believe, focusing on the very end of the violence, meaning like active shooter drills, and should you carry a gun? Do we get rid of guns? All those. We're all talking about the point of the shooting. There's so much to be done at the planning stage, and then before that, about the resentment stage. Yeah,
Yes.
and that's what we can do. But just moving on, I just want to put out there that one of the real problems is that I believe there's so much division in our communities today that it's breeding this extremism. One thing I want to I'm not defending, alt right or folks like that, but it's that I do believe that there is a lot of hostility pointed towards white people, and then especially white men or cis identified or straight white men. There's a lot of hostility pointed towards them, and that's what's breeding this response. I feel it's kind of natural that you're going to see these alt right groups growing because there's so much hostility towards them. But hey, oh, golly, I guess hey, still no one's responding. Man, what do I got to say to get someone to post a question? All right, a little bit more. The big thing, and now I'm expressing more of my own personal opinions, but I think it's very important that we have to be careful with free speech. Like, what is hate speech and what is free speech? That's a very important question, and it's difficult. We have to identify what is a threat. You just described that in a personal relationship. If a guy says, I'm sending you flowers or whatever, what does that mean? There's real concerns about guilt by association, that people, for instance, I think well, I'm not going to say it, but there's real concerns about there's a lot of intolerance going on, and we've got to be concerned. The concerns is that that intolerance is going to push things underground, and it's also going to make it worse. I don't know if you know who Richard Spencer is. He's a reported alt-right leader, reported white supremacist. There was a famous video online. You probably didn't. No one probably knows who he is until he got punched online. He was in this interview in this.
Oh, yeah, of course. Now I remember.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. So you remember that scene? The thing I got so upset about seeing that is he just got 30,000 new followers from that punch. I mean, you think you're
Right.
suppressing, you just punch the Nazi,
Right.
you were stopping the Nazis. No, you just
So
gave him
how
so much
dare you?
sympathy. Right.
Right.
Finally, regarding online, and this is some of the work I'm doing. Actually, I'm hoping I did a proposal, and if anyone's down there in this presentation that's on that board, please accept my proposal. Um, the question is about threat
Please accept
assessment.
his proposal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, just please accept his proposal.
Yes, please, because it's
I'm
really
backing
important.
up here.
It's about civil liberties concerns regarding, security. And I'm not sure this is hopping on another topic, but a recent incident was the Alfie Evans tragedy, where a young child, a baby, died. And I don't know if you're following it. The question is, there was a baby in a hospital who was dying of a life-threatening disease, and the doctor said there's nothing you can do for him. So then the Italian government said, "Hey, you know what? We'll make him an honorary citizen. He can come to Italy and receive treatment here. No guarantees. Probably will still die, but we'll give it a shot." The parents were forbidden from taking the child to Italy. I see there's a question. I'll address in just a point. So in response to that, there are a lot of people who were quite upset. The police department for the area posted online, this saying, we're making aware with these posts being monitored, and social media users need to know that these offenses, including malicious communications and threatening behavior, will be investigated and when necessary be acted upon. So absolutely, threats, crime. It's a crime to make a threat. You should be held accountable. But if I say socialized medicine is evil, am I now going to have a knock on my door for saying something like that? It's a tough question. Oh, hey, here's the question. Oh, from since you insist, Johnny, I have a question. Yay, thank you. What about when so many notifications are made, such as the Parkland incident with Nicholas Cruz, and the FBI did nothing? What could be done differently if this happens again? Great question. I get that a lot, my friend. So there's a couple of points. There's one is that you make the report and nothing gets done. I'm sorry to, okay. First of all, I don't know what happened there. That's my honest truth, is I have no idea what happened in Parkland. However, we take the mainstream media's approach. What's going on? It could, I think it's called the Hanlon's principle. Never attribute malice to what could be explained with incompetence. The FBI is an outstanding organization with very skilled people, but they just messed up. They made it was a mistake, and because they're humans, they made mistakes. So what do we do to answer your question? You keep reporting, keep reporting. And as you know, my friend, I'm not going to identify who you are, but right? You know that there's so many times it is reported and something was done and lives were saved. So quick answer: keep reporting, keep documenting. I do believe that since it's been so roundly vilified, the FBI and Broward County Sheriff's Department's response that no law enforcement agency is now going to let it slip by. My concern, to be honest with you, my friend, is when is it going to go too far? Now we have kids going to the range, right? I just took my daughter to the range, and she posts pictures of us shooting our guns. Is she going to be called into the office for that? That's there's a balance. Bea, do you have any thoughts about what I just said, or in response to the point about, this really speaks to what your work that you've done, where so many times victims go to the police saying, he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me, he's going to kill me, and nothing's done.
Right.
Yeah, please, can you speak to that?
Well, really, I don't have much more to say about that,
Yeah.
except that domestic violence victims are 500 times more likely to be killed when their abuser has a gun.
Yeah.
Or access to a gun. And that's because most of these guys are not your criminals, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The only person he abuses is her. So these are oftentimes the legal gun owners. And using a gun is much more quick and doesn't give time for second thoughts or for things to cool down. And so it just makes it much more dangerous in domestic violence cases. I understand that we have different points of view about guns, but in domestic violence cases, guns are much more dangerous.
There's absolutely no doubt that guns are dangerous. Yes, absolutely. And you're right, that is a real concern. Golly, this is another topic we can jump into, and we can bring some more people in and have lots of yelling. One of the issues is the 50, I said 50B, that's North Carolina. The domestic violence restraining orders prohibit federal law and state law. Well, state laws depends on what state you're in, but the federal law states that with a domestic violence restraining order, you cannot possess a firearm. Right. So now there's some questions here about. So as you know, neither of us are attorneys, but for a criminal case, the onus is on the prosecution to prove that you are guilty. In civil cases, the onus is on the defendant to prove that you're innocent. And so, again, I'm not an attorney, but there's some issues there. So a lot of people are concerned about second rights protections being infringed upon, but then from your point of view, and I agree, we need to protect these lives as well. So it's tough. It's a real tough point.
Yeah, and it's also tough in situations where, and I've been in situations where I've been threatened by a former client, and there's very little protection out there for people like
that. It's very
unless he makes a specific threat.
That's right.
Or it rises to the level of stalking, which it often does not.
Right.
Just knowing somebody's out there trying to destroy my life
That's
is
right.
not enough.
It's so difficult. You're right. And I want to say telephone harassment, stalking, even so I guess there's different levels of stalking in terms of like felony or misdemeanor. Communicating threats, these are all misdemeanors. You know what they get. They get maybe a day in jail and $500
so when
bond.
you take somebody to court, right, when you take somebody to court on a misdemeanor or to get a restraining order, does that agitate them further?
Excellent point.
And make things worse for you.
Excellent point. And that's a larger like threat assessment, like sort of advanced level. I don't know how advanced, but that's an excellent point, and it sure is a concern. One little note I want to put out there, because I just got to say this because of my workplace experience. Many states, including North Carolina, have workplace restraining orders. That certainly doesn't help them in their home, but it's something that it could shift the attention, like who takes out the threat.
Are you talking about a 50C in North Carolina?
Oh no.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. But
no,
50C. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is regarding this. That's what's called the stalking one, where there's two different individuals where you don't have a personal relationship. So, like you can take one out on me, and we've never dated, right? But it's you can do it on him. The workplace one comes out of the labor law. It's not in Chapter 50 at all. I can't remember which chapter, but it's an employer's right. It's really just a super trespass order. To me, that's what I call it. It's like a trespass order on steroids. Hey, so golly, we're there at the end. Is there any other comments from folks? And we got about 8 minutes left. Anything we can do to help explain stuff?
Well, I guess we're going to have jokes and a song and dance next time, Johnny.
That sounds good. That's right. Well, if we do this, and I might post, I might see about finding organizations if someone can be quote unquote a spokesperson for one of these, and we can provide them a honest platform. I mean, a fair platform. Maybe that'll get people more discussing things. But I really enjoyed this myself. And there's a lot of other topics. Hey, I got one for you. And please, people in the internet world or attending this, I really want to do one on toxic masculinity and about how that's been defined and stuff like that. So I think that's another conversation needs to be had.
Agreed.
Yep. Cool. Hey, so what are you doing this weekend? You got any plans?
Me? Oh boy, just fun and games. I'm actually looking for some festivals. So we have a strawberry festival here nearby, and I think I'll be attending a strawberry festival. Sound good to everybody?
That sounds wonderful. I love getting those little baskets and you collect strawberries. That's awesome. Got some smoothies.
There you go.
That sounds great.
Some good local music.
Absolutely. That sounds great. Good. I'm glad to hear about that. Thank you so much for joining me with this. I'll be in contact with you. Let's see about having another conversation. Maybe we need to repeat this one as well.
That sounds great. Now, is this being recorded, Johnny? Would it be available to everybody?
It sure is. I'll put it on YouTube, and I'll sure send you the note as soon as it's available.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Yes, thank you to everyone. Y'all stay safe out there and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.